A routine traffic stop turned into the biggest mistake of their careers. Two corrupt cops thought they could frame a black woman by planting drugs in her car, but when she calmly said, "I am the DEA," their world shattered. What followed left the entire courtroom stunned, and justice finally spoke louder than corruption. "You won't believe how it ends." The evening sun dipped low over the small town of Riverdale as Danielle Carter drove her black SUV along the quiet main road. To anyone watching, she looked like just another young black woman heading home after work. But behind her calm eyes, Danielle carried a secret no one on that road could have guessed. She was a DEA agent, working undercover on one of the most dangerous drug investigations in the state. As she passed a gas station, flashing blue and red lights suddenly appeared in her rearview mirror. A police cruiser blared its siren, signaling her to pull over. Danielle calmly guided her SUV to the side of the road, resting her hands firmly on the steering wheel, just as she had been trained. Two officers stepped out of the patrol car. Officer Bradley Cole, tall and broad-shouldered, adjusted his sunglasses and walked with an air of arrogance. Beside him, Officer Mark Reynolds followed closely, smirking as if they had already won a game Danielle didn't know she was playing. "Evening, ma'am," Cole said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "License and registration." Danielle complied, keeping her expression neutral. She'd worked enough cases to recognize when something felt off. These officers weren't following routine procedure. Their eyes darted nervously, and they exchanged quick glances as if plotting something. Cole leaned toward Reynolds and muttered something under his breath. Danielle's instincts sharpened. She had dealt with corrupt cops before, and she could feel trouble coming. When Reynolds pretended to inspect the back seat of her car, Danielle's heart raced. His hand dipped into his pocket. She knew that movement. She had seen it too many times in her line of work. Something was about to be planted. And Danielle Carter was ready. Officer Mark Reynolds crouched by Danielle's SUV, glancing around to ensure no one was watching. From his pocket, he slipped a small plastic bag filled with white powder and tucked it under the driver's seat. His smirk widened. This wasn't the first time he and Officer Bradley Cole had pulled a stunt like this. "Clear violation," Reynolds muttered, straightening up. "We've got ourselves a problem here." Cole adjusted his belt and stepped closer to Danielle's window. "Ma'am, you mind stepping out of the vehicle?" His tone had shifted from fake politeness to something heavier, laced with control. Danielle kept her voice even. "What's the reason for the stop?" Cole tilted his head. Broken tail light. And now, possibly, possession. His eyes glittered with a cruel satisfaction. Danielle raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She had been trained to remain calm under pressure, and right now, her silence was her weapon. As she stepped out of the SUV, her sharp gaze caught the faint outline of the bag Reynolds had clumsily hidden. She already knew their game. Reynolds moved in dramatically. Well, what do we have here?" he said loud enough for any passerby to hear. He reached under the seat and pulled out the planted bag. "Drugs. Looks like you're in some serious trouble, ma'am." Cole folded his arms. "You're under arrest. Hands behind your back." Danielle let out a slow breath. Inside, her patience was thinning. She wasn't afraid, far from it. She was calculating the exact moment to reveal who she really was. But she also knew this: the second she spoke, everything would change. For Cole and Reynolds, their entire world was about to collapse. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked tightly around Danielle Carter's wrists. Officer Bradley Cole forced her to lean against the hood of her SUV, pressing down harder than necessary, as if trying to humiliate her. "Another drug dealer off the streets," he muttered with a smirk, exchanging a nod with Officer Mark Reynolds. Reynolds held up the plastic bag dramatically, as though it were a trophy. "Gotta say, didn't expect this one. Dressed so clean, driving a nice car. And yet here you are." Danielle's jaw tightened. She could feel the weight of their arrogance pressing down on her, but her training reminded her to stay calm. She was undercover, and exposure at the wrong time could compromise an ongoing DEA operation. But being framed in broad daylight? That crossed a line. As Cole began reading a half-hearted version of her rights, Danielle studied his every move. She noted his nervous eyes, his shallow breath, signs of a man who had been playing dirty for too long and thought he was untouchable. Reynolds, on the other hand, was cocky but sloppy. He held the evidence too loosely, unaware of the fingerprints and camera angles that could betray him later. "You boys sure you want to do this?" Danielle finally spoke, her voice low but firm. Cole sneered. "Save it for the judge." Reynolds chuckled. "Trust me, sweetheart. You'll be locked away before you can even blink." Danielle's lips curved into the faintest smile. She wasn't resisting, but she wasn't afraid either. She was waiting. Timing was everything, because when she revealed her true identity, these officers wouldn't just regret tonight. They'd regret every crooked deal they had ever made. The patrol car door slammed shut as Danielle Carter sat cuffed in the back seat, her eyes calm yet sharp. Officer Bradley Cole slid into the driver's seat, while Officer Mark Reynolds placed the so-called evidence on the dashboard, grinning as if the case were already closed. Cole glanced at Danielle through the rearview mirror. "You know, people like you never learn. Thought you could hide in plain sight? Not on our watch." Danielle leaned back, her voice measured. "People like me? Or people you think you can frame without consequences?" Reynolds scoffed. "Consequences? Lady, once this hits the system, you'll be begging for mercy. Judges around here don't ask questions when it comes to drugs." Danielle tilted her head, studying them. "And when internal affairs comes knocking, when the evidence doesn't line up, you sure you've covered your tracks this time?" For a brief moment, silence filled the car. Cole's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. He masked it with a laugh. "Nice try. You're not in a position to be making threats." Danielle's eyes narrowed. "That wasn't a threat. That was a warning." Reynolds turned to Cole with a dismissive wave. "She's bluffing. They all do." But Danielle's steady gaze unnerved them. She wasn't panicking, wasn't pleading. Instead, she seemed in control, as if she knew more than she was letting on. Cole shook off his unease and started the engine. "We'll book her. Get this over with. She'll learn quick that smart talk won't save her." Danielle exhaled slowly, almost smiling. She knew the next few minutes would decide everything. Soon she would speak 5 words that would flip their world upside down. The patrol car rolled into the dimly lit parking lot behind the police station. Danielle Carter sat quietly in the back seat, her wrists still cuffed, her expression unreadable. Officer Bradley Cole killed the engine, while Officer Mark Reynolds grabbed the plastic bag from the dashboard like it was a prized catch. Cole opened the back door. "Out. Let's get you processed." Danielle stepped onto the cracked pavement, moving with a composure that irritated them both. Most people they framed begged, cried, or shouted. She hadn't done any of that. Instead, her calmness felt like a storm brewing. Reynolds leaned close, sneering. "This is the part where you realize your life is over. Kiss your freedom goodbye." Danielle's eyes locked on his. "My life? Or your careers?" Cole gripped her arm roughly. "That's enough mouth from you." Danielle drew in a steady breath, her patience reaching its limit. She had given them every chance to back off, but now it was time. Her voice cut through the night, sharp and commanding. "I am the DEA." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Both officers froze. Reynolds blinked, confused. Cole's grip faltered for the first time, his arrogance cracking. Danielle leaned forward slightly, her tone fierce. "You just planted federal evidence in the car of a federal agent. Do you understand what that means?" Cole's jaw tightened, his bravado slipping. Reynolds stuttered. You're lying. This is some trick." Danielle smiled faintly. "Check the credentials in my glove compartment. Gold badge, federal clearance. You'll see for yourself." Suddenly, their scheme wasn't a routine setup anymore. It was a career-ending disaster, and Danielle Carter had just turned the tables. For a long moment, silence gripped the back lot. Officer Bradley Cole's grip slackened completely, his hand trembling as if the badge he feared most had just been dropped on his chest. Officer Mark Reynolds, still clutching the planted bag, looked like a kid caught stealing candy. "DEA?" Reynolds muttered, his voice cracking. "You can't be serious." Danielle Carter's calm smile didn't waver, dead serious. "And right now, every second you waste denying it makes your situation worse. Federal obstruction, evidence tampering, civil rights violations. Shall I keep going?" Cole tried to regain his composure. "Listen, we didn't know." Danielle's tone sharpened. "Didn't know. You saw a black woman in a nice car and thought she was an easy target. Tell me I'm wrong." Reynolds shifted uncomfortably, his smirk long gone. His mind raced, realizing the planted bag now linked him directly to a federal crime. His fingerprints were all over it. Cole knew it too, the color drained from his face. Danielle leaned closer, her words deliberate. "Go ahead, check the glove box. My badge, my ID, it's all there. And while you're at it, consider how this looks to internal affairs when I report it." Cole hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Reynolds, hands shaking, walked to the SUV and pulled out a sleek leather case from the glove compartment. He flipped it open. The golden DEA badge gleamed under the parking lot light, undeniable and unforgiving. His stomach dropped. Danielle raised her cuffed hands. "Now, gentlemen, shall we talk about how you're going to explain this?" For the first time, the officers weren't in control. The power had shifted, and they knew it. The golden shine of the DEA badge hit Officer Bradley Cole and Officer Mark Reynolds like a lightning strike. Reynolds nearly dropped the case, his face pale as if the ground beneath him had vanished. Danielle Carter straightened her back, despite still being cuffed. "Now you know who you're dealing with. Federal jurisdiction outranks your little roadside games." Cole clenched his jaw, scrambling for control. "Badges can be faked. You think we'll just take your word for it?" Danielle's eyes burned with steel. "Run the number on the back. That's a federal clearance code. Go ahead. Call it in. But when headquarters answers, you'd better be ready to explain why you're detaining one of their own." Reynolds glanced nervously at Cole. "Brad, maybe we should—" "Shut up!" Cole snapped, though his voice lacked the confidence it once carried. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Danielle leaned closer, lowering her voice but sharpening her words. "You boys just crossed the line from corrupt cops to federal criminals. The difference? The first gets you fired. The second gets you prison." Her words hit like bullets. Reynolds swallowed hard. "Look, maybe we can talk this out?" Danielle let out a dry laugh. "Talk this out? You planted drugs in my car. You shoved cuffs on a DEA agent. This isn't going away with a handshake." Cole's hand trembled as he reached for his radio, torn between covering it up or confirming the nightmare. His arrogance was cracking, piece by piece. Danielle tilted her head, her calm returning like a storm ready to break. "Tick-tock, gentlemen. Every second you stall makes it worse." For the first time, Cole and Reynolds weren't predators. They were prey. The tension in the parking lot was suffocating. Officer Bradley Cole gripped his radio so tightly his knuckles whitened. Officer Mark Reynolds shifted nervously, glancing from the DEA badge to Danielle Carter's steady gaze. "Brad, we should call it in," Reynolds whispered, his voice shaking. Cole hesitated. If he confirmed her credentials, their careers were finished. If he didn't, they risked digging their hole even deeper. His pride screamed to deny it, but Danielle's calm confidence gnawed at him. Danielle tilted her head. "I'll make it easier. Channel 9. Call the DEA field office. Ask for Director James Howard. He'll verify me." Reynolds' breath caught. The name alone sounded like trouble. Cole swallowed hard and finally pressed the button. "Dispatch, this is Officer Cole. Need to verify credentials. Federal ID number." His voice faltered as he read the clearance code from the back of her badge. The radio crackled. A dispatcher's voice came through. "Stand by." Seconds dragged like hours. Reynolds wiped sweat from his brow. Danielle remained silent, her calmness more intimidating than any threat. Finally, the radio hissed again. "Confirmed. Agent Danielle Carter, DEA. Clearance active and high level. Who is this?" Cole froze, his face draining of color. Reynolds' knees nearly buckled. Danielle leaned forward, her voice a whisper of authority. "Now you understand. You didn't just stop a random woman. You interfered with an ongoing federal operation." The radio still buzzed. "Repeat. Identify yourselves immediately. Why are you detaining Agent Carter?" Cole fumbled for words, stammering, Traffic stop. Misunderstanding." Danielle's eyes narrowed. Misunderstanding won't save you now. The trap they set for her had just snapped shut, around them. The radio hissed again, sharper this time. "This is DEA Field Director James Howard. Agent Carter, confirm your status." Danielle Carter straightened her shoulders, her voice calm but firm. "Director, this is Special Agent Carter, currently detained by local officers Cole and Reynolds. They attempted to plant narcotics in my vehicle." The silence that followed was chilling. Then Howard's voice boomed through the static, laced with fury. "Stay where you are, Agent. We're on our way." And officers, do not move her again. Do you understand me? Cole's face twisted with panic. He dropped the radio back onto the dash, muttering, "This is bad. This is really bad." Reynolds looked around the lot as if searching for an escape route. "Brad, they're going to bury us. Federal charges. This is prison time." Danielle stepped forward, the cuffs still clamped on her wrists but her presence towering over them both. "You're right about one thing. This doesn't end with a slap on the wrist. You tampered with evidence, abused your power, and targeted me because of the color of my skin. That ends tonight." Headlights cut through the dark as two black SUVs roared into the lot. Doors flew open and armed DEA agents spilled out, weapons drawn, forming a perimeter. At the front strode Director James Howard himself, his face like thunder. "Uncuff her," Howard barked. Cole hesitated, then fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as he released Danielle. The click of the cuffs falling away echoed like a gavel striking judgment. Howard glared at the two officers. "You just made the biggest mistake of your lives." For Cole and Reynolds, the night had only begun, and so had their downfall. The DEA agents surrounded the lot, their black jackets with bold yellow letters glowing under the headlights. Officer Bradley Cole and Officer Mark Reynolds stood frozen, their arrogance dissolved into sheer terror. Director James Howard walked directly to Danielle Carter, his voice softer now. "Agent Carter, are you unharmed?" Danielle rubbed her wrists where the cuffs had bitten into her skin. "I'm fine, Director, but I want this handled by the book. Every detail." Howard nodded firmly, then turned his burning glare on the two officers. "You think planting evidence is a game? You just tampered with an undercover DEA operation. That's obstruction of justice, evidence fabrication, false arrest. Shall I keep going?" Cole tried to speak, his voice trembling. We didn't know who she was." Danielle cut him off, her tone like ice. "That's the problem. You didn't care who I was. You saw a black woman and thought I was easy prey. You've probably done this before, haven't you?" Reynolds stammered. It was just a mistake." Howard's fist slammed onto the hood of the cruiser. "A mistake? You planted drugs in a federal agent's car." Two DEA agents stepped forward, pulling Cole and Reynolds' arms behind their backs, slapping cuffs on them with no hesitation. The irony of it wasn't lost on Danielle. The very tools they had used to demean her now bound their own wrists. Danielle's voice was steady but filled with fire. "You wanted to strip me of my dignity, but instead, you've stripped yourselves of your badges. Tonight, justice speaks louder than corruption." Cole's face hardened in shame. Reynolds lowered his head, defeated. For the first time, the power was exactly where it belonged, back in the hands of justice. The station buzzed with chaos as word spread that two local officers had been caught red-handed framing a DEA agent. Reporters swarmed the parking lot, cameras flashing, microphones pushing forward. The story was too explosive to contain. Inside, Danielle Carter sat at a long table with Director James Howard and Detective Sarah Mitchell, one of the few local cops known for her integrity. Sarah had been called in as a witness to ensure no part of this investigation was buried. Howard leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "Agent Carter, your testimony will seal this. But I want you to know, you handled tonight flawlessly. Most would have broken under that kind of pressure." Danielle nodded. "I didn't break because I couldn't. Too many people have suffered at the hands of officers like them. If I let it slide, I'd be no better." Detective Mitchell spoke up. "You should know, Cole and Reynolds had a reputation. Complaints from citizens, most of them black, about harassment, intimidation, false arrests, but no one could prove it. Until now." Danielle's eyes sharpened. "Then tonight isn't just about me. It's about every victim who never got justice." Meanwhile, down the hall, Cole and Reynolds sat in holding cells, their heads in their hands. The same community they once terrorized now stared through the glass, whispering, recording on their phones, documenting the downfall of men who thought they were untouchable. Howard turned back to Danielle. "Tomorrow, you'll testify before Internal Affairs. This department will clean house." Danielle's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of history. "Good, because corruption doesn't just stain the badge, it stains justice, and justice deserves better." The tide had turned, and this time, it would not be silenced. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every seat, their pens scratching eagerly, cameras flashing whenever Danielle Carter stepped into view. Across the aisle, Officer Bradley Cole and Officer Mark Reynolds sat in shackles, their once proud uniforms stripped away, replaced with orange jumpsuits. The judge's gavel struck sharply. This hearing will decide whether the charges against Officers Cole and Reynolds will proceed to federal court. Danielle stood tall at the witness stand, her voice unwavering. She described every detail of the night, the full stop, the planted drugs, the smug threats, and the moment she revealed her DEA badge. The room was silent, every word landing like a hammer. When the defense tried to argue it was a misunderstanding, Danielle's eyes narrowed. A misunderstanding is forgetting a turn signal. This was deliberate corruption, and it nearly cost me my freedom. Detective Sarah Mitchell testified next, presenting records of complaints long buried by the department. Community members came forward too, their voices trembling but resolute, finally being heard after years of silence. By the time Director James Howard addressed the court, the outcome was clear. The DEA stands firmly behind Agent Carter. And let this be a message: corruption in uniform will be exposed, no matter how deeply it hides. The judge's verdict rang out. Both defendants will stand trial in federal court for obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations. Gasps filled the room. Cole hung his head in shame. Reynolds wept openly. Outside, Danielle stepped into the sunlight, cameras flashing all around her. Reporters shouted questions, but she spoke only one line into their microphones. Justice isn't optional, it's owed. And last night, we claimed it. 4. Danielle Carter, the mission was never about revenge. It was about restoring faith in justice and ensuring no one else would be silenced.